Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Foundation. Benjamin Rhodes had built his life on three principles: loyalty, discipline, and consequences. At 42, he stood 6'3" with silver threading through his dark hair and scars that told stories he'd never share. His security consulting firm, Rhodes Protection Services, catered to high-profile clients who needed more than standard security. They needed a man who understood that sometimes the best defense was a devastating offense. 20 years ago, Benjamin had returned from 3 tours in Afghanistan with a Purple Heart, a limp that only showed when he was tired, and a clarity about human nature that most people never achieved. He'd met Veronica Finley at a charity gala for veterans. She was 25, blonde, and working as a pharmaceutical sales rep with ambitions that stretched far beyond her modest background. "You're not like other soldiers," she'd said that first night, her fingers tracing the scar along his jawline. "You're going places." She was right, though not in the way she'd imagined. Benjamin had channeled his military discipline into building a $1 million business. He bought a sprawling estate in the Virginia hills, put Rod through private school, and given Veronica everything she'd ever claimed to want. But somewhere along the way, everything had stopped being enough for her. Rod Rhodes, now 16, had inherited his father's build and his mother's ambition, though it manifested differently. Where Veronica craved attention and luxury, Rod sought achievement and respect. He excelled in wrestling, maintained a 4.0 GPA, and had already received preliminary interest from West Point. Benjamin saw himself in his son's dedication, and it was one of the few things that still brought him genuine pride. The marriage had been deteriorating for 3 years, though Benjamin had chosen to focus on his business and his son rather than address it directly. Veronica's late nights, unexplained expenses, and growing distance weren't mysteries. They were simply problems he'd decided weren't worth solving. He'd learned in the military that sometimes you had to accept casualties to win the larger war. That philosophy was about to be tested. Austin Bradshaw entered their lives like a virus, slowly, then all at once. At 34, he was a personal trainer at Veronica's gym, all flash and no substance. He drove a leased BMW, wore designer clothes he couldn't afford, and specialized in telling wealthy housewives exactly what they wanted to hear. His background was a carefully constructed lie. He claimed to be a former college football player when he'd actually dropped out sophomore year, said he was working on a fitness app when he could barely manage his own finances. But Austin understood something Benjamin had forgotten. Veronica needed to feel special, desired, and above all, young. While Benjamin built empires, Austin built fantasies. And for a woman approaching 40 with a husband who treated her like a business partner, fantasy had become more appealing than reality. The affair had started 6 months ago with accidental meetings at the coffee shop near the gym. Austin would time his arrivals perfectly, always appearing just as Veronica finished her morning workout. He'd compliment her form, suggest better techniques, and gradually position himself as someone who truly understood her. By winter, they were meeting at a downtown apartment Austin borrowed from a friend. By spring, Veronica was transferring money from joint accounts to fund Austin's increasingly grandiose plans. And by summer, they were making plans that went far beyond affair. They were planning a future that didn't include Benjamin. What neither of them realized was that Benjamin Rhodes wasn't the type of man you discarded quietly. He'd spent 20 years learning how to identify threats, assess weaknesses, and neutralize enemies. The fact that his greatest threat now came from within his own home didn't make him any less dangerous. It made him more focused. Dick Finley, Veronica's father, had never liked Benjamin. At 71, Dick was a retired Union foreman who believed real men worked with their hands, not their heads. He saw Benjamin's success as some kind of scam, his military service as overrated, and his authority over Veronica as something that needed to be challenged. Dick had been encouraging Veronica's affair from the beginning, seeing Austin as the kind of regular guy his daughter deserved. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reveal exactly who Benjamin Rhodes really was, and what happened to people who mistook his restraint for weakness. Chapter 2. fractures. The first sign that Benjamin's controlled world was about to explode came on a Tuesday evening in late July. Rod burst through the front door of their Virginia estate, his wrestling gear bag slung over his shoulder, his face animated with excitement about an upcoming tournament. Benjamin was in his study, reviewing security protocols for a senator's upcoming campaign events, when he heard Veronica's voice from the kitchen. "We need to talk about Rod's wrestling." Benjamin closed his laptop and walked toward the kitchen, already sensing tension in his wife's tone. He found Veronica leaning against the granite counter, her gym clothes telling him she'd just returned from another workout with Austin, though her hair was too perfect and her makeup too fresh for someone who'd actually exercised. "What about it?" Benjamin asked, noting how she avoided eye contact. "It's too expensive. The tournament fees, the equipment, the travel costs, it's adding up." Rod appeared in the doorway, his excitement fading as he processed the conversation. "But Dad already paid for the tournament. Coach says I have a real shot at state this year." Veronica's jaw tightened. "Well, maybe your father should have discussed it with me first before making financial commitments." Benjamin studied his wife's face, recognizing the signs he'd learned to read in hostile territory. The forced confidence masking desperation, the manufactured grievances designed to justify decisions already made. She wasn't concerned about money. She was creating distance, manufacturing conflicts that would make her eventual departure seem justified. "The tournament fee was $400, Benjamin said quietly. "You spent $600 at the spa last week. That's different." "Ow!" Veronica's face flushed. "I don't have to justify every expense to you, Benjamin. We're supposed to be partners." The irony wasn't lost on him. Partners. While she was planning her exit strategy with Austin Bradshaw, she was lecturing him about partnership. Benjamin's military training had taught him to compartmentalize emotions, to observe and assess before acting. So he observed the new jewelry she thought he hadn't noticed, the way she'd started staying out later, the defensive anger that flared whenever he asked simple questions. "You're right," he said finally. "We are partners. Rod, go ahead with the tournament. Your mother and I can discuss finances later." Rod's relief was visible, but he still looked between his parents with the uncomfortable awareness that something larger was happening. At 16, he was old enough to sense the tension, but young enough to hope it would resolve itself. That night, after Rod had gone to bed, Benjamin made a decision that would change everything. He activated surveillance protocols he'd hoped never to use. The same digital monitoring systems he installed for clients who suspected corporate espionage or domestic threats. Within hours, he had confirmation of what he'd already known. Veronica's phone contained 6 months of communications with Austin Bradshaw, including photos, financial transactions, and plans for a future that didn't include Benjamin or Rod. But Benjamin didn't confront her. Instead, he began documenting everything with a methodical precision that had made him successful in both the military and business. Every lie, every transaction, every broken promise was cataloged and stored. He was building a case, though for what trial, he hadn't yet decided. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. Benjamin had been in Washington for 2 days, consulting with a cabinet member about security for an international summit. He'd returned home a day early, planning to surprise Rod with tickets to a Nationals game. The house was supposed to be empty. Veronica had told him she was visiting her sister in North Carolina, and Rod was at wrestling camp. Instead, he found Austin Bradshaw in his kitchen, making coffee with the expensive machine Benjamin had bought Veronica for Christmas. Austin was shirtless, wearing only boxers, completely comfortable in another man's home. The sheer audacity of it triggered something primal in Benjamin. Not jealousy, but the cold rage of a soldier who'd discovered an enemy had infiltrated his base. Austin jumped when he saw Benjamin, coffee mug slipping from his hands and shattering on the tile floor. "Jesus, man, I didn't. Veronica said you were out of town." "I was." Benjamin's voice carried the same calm tone he'd used when interrogating captured insurgents. "Where is she?" "Upstairs, shower. Look, this isn't what." "It's exactly what it looks like." Benjamin stepped closer, noting how Austin's fake confidence crumbled under direct confrontation. "The question is what you're going to do about it." Before Austin could answer, Veronica appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing Benjamin's bathrobe. Her face went white when she saw her husband, but she recovered quickly, lifting her chin with defiance that would have been admirable if it weren't so misplaced. "We need to talk," she said, descending the stairs with forced composure. "No," Benjamin replied. "We needed to talk 6 months ago. Now, we need to make decisions." The next hour unfolded like a military briefing, cold, efficient, and utterly devastating. Benjamin laid out what he knew. Every detail, every lie, every financial transaction. He presented it without emotion, watching his wife realize that her affair hadn't been as secretive as she believed. "I want a divorce," Veronica said finally, as if she were doing him a favor. "Of course you do." Benjamin's smile held no warmth. "The question is whether you get one on your terms or mine." That was when Austin made his fatal mistake. Instead of keeping quiet, instead of recognizing that he was completely outmatched, he decided to assert himself. "Look, man, Veronica and I are in love. We didn't mean for this to happen, but—" Benjamin's laugh was genuinely amused. "You didn't mean for this to happen? You borrowed your friend's apartment. You convinced my wife to fund your lifestyle. You planned this down to the financial arrangements. The only thing you didn't plan for was getting caught. We're going to be together," Austin said, his jaw set. "With or without your permission." "You're absolutely right," Benjamin agreed. "You're going to be together. The question is whether you'll be together with my son's college fund, my wife's inheritance, and half of everything I've built, or whether you'll be together with nothing but each other and whatever consequences I decide you've earned." The threat hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Veronica grabbed Austin's arm, finally understanding that her husband wasn't going to make this easy. But Austin, drunk on testosterone and the fantasy that he could compete with a man like Benjamin Rhodes, made a choice that would haunt him. "Are you threatening us?" Benjamin's smile grew wider. "Austin, threats are what you make when you want someone to change their behavior. I'm not interested in changing yours. I'm interested in seeing exactly how far you're willing to take it." It was a challenge wrapped in a promise, and Austin was too stupid to recognize either. Chapter 3: The Catalyst. The call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Friday. Benjamin's phone buzzed with the emergency tone he'd programmed for family contacts, instantly snapping him from sleep to full alertness, a skill honed by years of midnight alerts in war zones. "Dad!" Rod's voice was thick with pain and confusion. "I need you to come get me." Benjamin was already reaching for clothes. "Where are you?" "Hospital. St. Mary's emergency." There was... "Dad, Austin hit me." The line went dead. 20 minutes later, Benjamin walked into St. Mary's emergency department with the controlled urgency of a man who'd received too many calls like this during his military service. He found Rod in bed 7, left side of his face swollen, a butterfly bandage covering a cut above his eyebrow, and his right hand wrapped in gauze. "Tell me," Benjamin said, pulling a chair close to the bed. Rod's story came out in painful fragments. He'd returned from wrestling camp a day early because his teammate's father had to drive back for a work emergency. Instead of calling, Rod had decided to surprise his parents. He'd used his key to enter through the garage, planning to grab food from the kitchen before announcing his return. He'd found Austin and Veronica in the living room, Austin's hand around a bottle of Benjamin's 25-year-old scotch, Veronica wearing jewelry Rod had never seen before. They were discussing timeline, when to tell Benjamin about the affair, how to handle the divorce, what to do about the kid. "He called me the kid," Rod said, his voice tight with humiliation, like I was some problem they had to solve. Rod had confronted them, demanding to know what was happening. Veronica had started crying, claiming everything was complicated, that Rod wouldn't understand. But Austin had taken a different approach. "Your father's a controlling asshole who thinks he owns everyone around him," Austin had said, the scotch making him bold. "Your mother deserves better, and frankly, so do you." Rod had defended his father, which had triggered Austin's explosive temper. The personal trainer who specialized in intimidating women and weaker men found himself faced with a 16-year-old who'd inherited Benjamin's backbone and 3 years of wrestling training. "He grabbed my shirt," Rod continued, started yelling about respect, and how I was just a spoiled kid who didn't know anything about the real world. I told him to get his hand. Austin had shoved Rod backward, sending him stumbling into the coffee table. When Rod got up, ready to fight, Austin had thrown a wild punch that caught him above the left eye. Rod had responded with a wrestling takedown that sent Austin crashing into the entertainment center, but the damage was done. Blood was streaming down Rod's face from the cut, and Veronica was screaming. Mom helped him up first, Rod said, the betrayal clear in his voice. He was fine, maybe a bruise, but she went to him first. Then she looked at me bleeding and said, Rod paused, swallowing hard. She said I deserved it for disrespecting Austin. Benjamin felt something cold and familiar settle in his chest. The same feeling he'd experienced in Afghanistan when his unit had been betrayed by local allies they'd trusted. It was the moment when you realized that mercy was a luxury you could no longer afford. Who brought you here? I drove myself. I know I'm not supposed to, but you did the right thing. Benjamin reached out and gently touched his son's uninjured cheek. Did you call the police? Rod shook his head. I thought about it, but she's still my mom. Benjamin understood. Rod was protecting the family unit even as it was being destroyed, showing more loyalty than the adults in his life. It was exactly what Benjamin would have done at that age, and exactly why Rod was going to get hurt if Benjamin didn't act. A knock on the door interrupted them. Benjamin turned to see Veronica and Dick Finley standing in the doorway. Veronica's eyes were red, her makeup smeared, but she'd had time to compose herself. Dick looked like he'd been dragged from bed, his gray hair wild and his expression hostile. Rod, honey, are you okay? Veronica moved toward the bed, but Rod turned away from her. Where's Austin? Benjamin asked quietly. That's not your concern, Dick said, stepping forward. We need to talk about this situation. Benjamin stood slowly, and Dick took an involuntary step backward. At 6'1" and stocky from years of manual labor, Dick was used to intimidating people. But Benjamin's presence was different, controlled, patient, and absolutely lethal. The situation is that your daughter's boyfriend assaulted my son in my house, Benjamin said. What did you want to discuss? Rod provoked him, Veronica said quickly. He came home and started making accusations, calling Austin names. He defended his father when Austin insulted me. Benjamin cut her off. And you think he deserved to be punched for that? Austin was protecting himself. Rod attacked him first. Benjamin looked at his wife with the clinical detachment he'd once reserved for enemy combatants. Rod weighs 170. Austin weighs 220 and makes his living teaching people how to fight. You're telling me a grown man was protecting himself from a 16-year-old boy by punching him in the face? It was an accident, Dick said. These things happen when tempers flare. You're right, Benjamin agreed. They do happen. And now we all get to live with the consequences. Something in Benjamin's tone made Veronica nervous. What do you mean? Benjamin looked down at Rod, then back at his wife. I mean that you and Austin just crossed a line you can't uncross. Rod is my son, and anyone who hurts him hurts me. And I don't forgive people who hurt me. Are you threatening my daughter? Dick stepped closer, his chest puffed out. Benjamin smiled. Dick, if I were threatening your daughter, you'd know it. This is me explaining reality. Your daughter chose Austin Bradshaw over her own son. She watched a grown man assault a child and decided the child was at fault. That choice has consequences. You can't, Veronica started. I can't what? Benjamin's voice remained perfectly calm. I can't protect my son. I can't respond when someone assaults him in my own home. I can't hold people accountable for their actions. The hospital room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and distant conversations from the hallway. Finally, a doctor appeared to discharge Rod, providing instructions for caring for his injuries and follow-up appointments. As they prepared to leave, Dick made one final mistake. You take Rod home and cool off, he said, pointing a thick finger at Benjamin. Veronica's coming with me. We'll sort this out like adults tomorrow. Benjamin looked at Dick for a long moment, then at Veronica, who was avoiding eye contact with both her husband and her son. You're right, Benjamin said finally. We will sort this out. All of it. As they walked toward the parking garage, Rod limping slightly from a bruised hip, Benjamin made a decision that would change all their lives forever. The The time for measured responses and civilized solutions was over. Austin Bradshaw and everyone who supported him were about to learn what happened when you declared war on Benjamin Rhodes. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over. You can't control everyone forever." Benjamin showed the message to Rod, who read it with growing anger. "What are you going to do, Dad?" Benjamin deleted the message and put his arm around his son's shoulders. "I'm going to teach some people about consequences. And I'm going to make sure you never have to worry about Austin Bradshaw again." "What about Mom?" Benjamin paused at the car, looking back at the hospital where his marriage had officially ended. "Your mother made her choice, son. Now she gets to live with it." Chapter 4. The Reckoning. Benjamin spent the next 3 days in his study, emerging only to check on Rod and to maintain the appearance of normal routine. But behind a closed door, he was conducting war planning with the same methodical precision that had made him legendary in military circles. The surveillance equipment he'd installed throughout the house had captured everything. Austin's assault on Rod, Veronica's immediate defense of her lover, and the callous way they discussed handling the situation afterward. But Benjamin wasn't interested in legal justice. The courts would give Austin a slap on the wrist for simple assault, and Veronica would walk away with half of everything he'd built. No, this required a different kind of justice. Blake Cheney knocked on the study door Friday evening. Benjamin's former sergeant had joined Rhodes Protection Services after his own military discharge, bringing skills that weren't advertised on the company website. Blake was the man Benjamin called when clients needed problems solved quietly and permanently. "You asked me to dig into Austin Bradshaw," Blake said, settling into the chair across from Benjamin's desk. "This guy's a walking disaster." Blake laid out a comprehensive file. Austin's real name was actually Angel Gray, changed after a series of bad debts and legal troubles in Texas. He'd been married twice, both times to women with money, both times leaving them financially devastated. His personal training certification was expired, his apartment was 3 months behind on rent, and he owed money to some very unpleasant people in Baltimore. "Gets better," Blake continued. "He's been running the same con on 3 other women at that gym, promising them new lives while draining their accounts. One of them, Celia Carney, lost her kids' college funds. Another one, Leah Gorman, had to move back in with her parents." Benjamin studied the photographs Blake had taken. Austin meeting with different women, accepting cash payments, making promises he had no intention of keeping. What about Veronica? She's not his first rich wife to fall for the act, but she might be his last. He's got credit cards in her name, access to joint accounts, and she's been transferring money to cover his gambling debts. Your wife's not just having an affair. She's being systematically robbed. But Benjamin felt no satisfaction at this revelation. Veronica's victimization didn't excuse her betrayal of Rod, and it certainly didn't excuse watching her lover assault their son. "There's something else," Blake said, his voice grim. "Angel's got a history of violence against kids. Nothing that stuck in court, but 3 different complaints from ex-wives about him hitting their children. Your boy wasn't the first." Benjamin closed the file, his decision crystallizing. "I want you to arrange a meeting." "With who?" "Everyone. Austin, Veronica, Dick. Tomorrow night. The warehouse on Industrial Road." Blake raised an eyebrow. "The one with the soundproofing?" "That's the one." "Boss, whatever you're planning." "I'm not planning anything," Benjamin said quietly. "I'm going to give them exactly what they want. A chance to be together forever." Saturday night arrived with unseasonable cold for July. Storm clouds gathering over the Virginia hills like an omen. Benjamin had sent carefully crafted messages to each of his targets, using different approaches to ensure their attendance. To Austin, "I have a business proposition that could solve all your money problems. Come alone." To Veronica, "Rod wants to talk to you. He's ready to apologize." To Dick, "Your daughter needs your help with something important." The warehouse was one of several properties Benjamin owned through shell companies, officially used for storing client equipment, but equipped with features most storage facilities didn't require. Digital surveillance systems, soundproof walls, and multiple exit points that could be controlled remotely. Austin arrived first, his BMW looking out of place in the industrial district. He entered through the main door to find Benjamin waiting in the center of the empty space, illuminated by a single overhead light. "Where's the client?" Austin asked, his voice echoing in the vast space. "There is no client," Benjamin replied. "There's just us." Austin's confusion turned to nervousness as he realized they were alone. "Look, man, about what happened with Rod." "What happened with Rod is that you assaulted a 16-year-old boy in his own home," Benjamin said, his voice carrying easily through the space. "What happens next depends on how honest you want to be about who you really are." "I don't know what you mean." Benjamin smiled. "Angel Gray, born in Dallas, married to Rebecca Harrison until you cleaned out her bank account. Then Pauline Hill in Houston until you got caught stealing from her mother. Should I continue?" Austin's face went pale. "How did you?" "I'm very good at finding things out. The question is, what are you going to do now that you know I know?" Before Austin could answer, the warehouse door opened again. Veronica entered, followed closely by Dick, both of them stopping short when they saw Austin and Benjamin facing each other in the dim light. "What is this?" Veronica demanded. "Where's Rod?" "Rod is safe at home," Benjamin said, "which is more than I can say for the rest of you." Dick stepped forward aggressively. "You dragged us out here to play games? I've had enough of your—" The lights suddenly blazed to full brightness, revealing that they were surrounded by enlarged photographs mounted on easels. Images of Austin with his previous victims, bank statements showing Veronica's transfers to Austin's accounts, and surveillance photos of their affair spanning 6 months. In the center of the display was a blown-up image from the hospital security camera showing Rod's battered face. "Jesus," Austin whispered. "This ends tonight," Benjamin said, his voice cutting through their shock. "All of it. The lies, the theft, the betrayal. Everything." Veronica found her voice first. "You can't hold us here. This is kidnapping." "The doors are unlocked," Benjamin pointed out. "You're free to leave any time. But if you do, everything you see here gets released to the police, the IRS, your employers, Rod's school, and anyone else who might be interested." "What do you want?" Dick demanded. Benjamin walked slowly around the group, like a predator circling prey. "I want confessions. I want admissions. I want the truth about everything. The affairs, the money, the assault on my son, and the plan to destroy my family." "And if we give you that," Austin asked, "then you get to walk away. All of you. Tonight. Forever. What's the catch?" Veronica said suspiciously. Benjamin's smile was cold as winter. "The catch is that you have to mean it. Complete confessions, on camera, admitting everything you've done. And then you disappear from our lives permanently." "That's it." Austin looked skeptical. "That's it," Benjamin confirmed. "One chance to tell the truth and walk away. Or we can do this the hard way." Dick stepped forward, his chest puffed out. "And what's the hard way?" Benjamin's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the atmosphere of the warehouse. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of a man who'd killed enemies with his bare hands. "The hard way is when I stop being civilized." Chapter 5. Truth and Consequences. The confessions began with Austin, the weakest link in their triangle of betrayal. Benjamin had positioned a camera on a tripod, professional lighting, and a chair that looked like something from an interrogation room, which in many ways it was. "Start with your real name," Benjamin instructed. Austin, Angel, sat uncomfortably under the lights, glancing nervously at Veronica and Dick. "My name is Angel Gray. I'm 34 years old, and I'm from Dallas, Texas." Continue. The story that emerged was even worse than Blake's investigation had revealed. Angel had refined his con over 15 years, targeting lonely women with money and a need to feel desired. He'd studied their patterns, learned their weaknesses, and crafted personas designed to exploit their emotional vulnerabilities. Veronica was perfect, he said, avoiding her shocked stare. Wealthy husband who ignored her, plenty of money, desperate to feel young again. I knew exactly what to say. "What was the long-term plan?" Benjamin asked. Angel's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Get her to leave you, take half in the divorce, then clean her out and disappear. I've done it 4 times before." Veronica's gasp echoed through the warehouse. "You said you loved me." Angel finally looked at her, and his expression held no remorse. "I said what you needed to hear. You were a mark, Veronica. Nothing more. What about Rod?" Benjamin's voice remained steady, but everyone in the room felt the temperature drop. The kid was a problem. Kids always ask too many questions, notice too many things. I figured once I got rid of you, I could convince Veronica to ship him off to boarding school or military academy. Out of sight, out of mind. And when he confronted you, Angel's jaw tightened. He disrespected me in front of Veronica. I wasn't going to let some teenage punk make me look weak. So you punched him. I defended myself. Benjamin's laugh was devoid of humor. You defended yourself against a 16-year-old boy by punching him in the face. In his own home. After he caught you stealing from his family. It wasn't like that. That's exactly what it was like. Benjamin leaned forward. And what did you plan to do if he'd fought back? If he'd been seriously injured? If he'd pressed charges? Angel shrugged. Veronica was handling it. She was going to convince him it was his fault that he'd attacked me first. Kids are easy to manipulate when their parents back you up. The casual cruelty of it hung in the air like poison gas. Benjamin glanced at Veronica, who was staring at Angel with growing horror as she realized how completely she'd been manipulated. Your turn, Benjamin said to his wife. Veronica's confession was harder to extract, filtered through layers of self-justification and wounded pride. But eventually, the truth emerged. She'd been unhappy for years, feeling ignored and taken for granted. Angel had made her feel special, desired, alive in ways she'd forgotten were possible. I never meant for it to go this far, she said, tears streaming down her face. It was supposed to be just fun, a fling, something to make me feel young again. When did it become more than that? When he started talking about the future, about us being together. He said you were controlling me, that Rod would be better off without your influence, that we could have a real life together. And you believed him? Veronica's voice broke. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe someone could love me that much. Enough to betray your son? I thought Rod would understand eventually. That he'd see Angel wasn't as bad as you made him out to be. Even after Angel punched him? Veronica's silence stretched for nearly a minute. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. I was scared. Angel was so angry and Rod was bleeding, and I panicked. I said what I thought would calm Angel down. You told your injured son that he deserved to be assaulted. I didn't mean it, but you said it. Yes. Dick's confession was shorter, but no less damning. He'd encouraged the affair from the beginning, seeing Angel as a way to get Veronica away from Benjamin's influence. He'd provided alibis, helped with logistics, and actively undermined Benjamin's authority whenever possible. I never liked you, Dick said bluntly. You came back from the war thinking you were better than everyone else. Veronica deserves a man who treats her like a queen, not a business partner. So you helped her commit adultery and steal from her family? I helped her find happiness by encouraging her to betray her son. Dick's face flushed. Rod's got too much of you in him. He needed to learn that his father isn't God. So you supported Angel punching him? The boy was out of line. Someone needed to put him in his place. Benjamin turned off the camera and stood silent for several minutes, processing what he'd heard. 3 adults had systematically betrayed a 16-year-old boy, justified assault against him, and planned to destroy his family for money and selfish gratification. You have your confessions, Veronica said finally. Now we can go. Benjamin looked at her with something approaching pity. Do you really think it's that simple? I said you get a chance to walk away. I never said I let you take anything with you. Benjamin pressed a button on his phone, and the warehouse's main lights dimmed while spotlights illuminated 3 tables that had been hidden in the shadows. Each table contained stacks of documents, contracts, and legal papers. Table 1, Benjamin announced, contains divorce papers. No fault, expedited, with custody of Rod going entirely to me. Veronica gets to keep her personal belongings and the car. Everything else stays with the family. Veronica's eyes widened. That's not legal. I'm entitled to half. Table 2, Benjamin continued, contains a complete accounting of every dollar you've stolen from our accounts and transferred to Angel. The total is $147,000. You can sign a promissory note agreeing to repay it, or I can file criminal charges for theft. Table 3 contains a restraining order preventing any of you from coming within 500 yards of Rod ever again. It also contains an agreement that you'll relocate at least 3 states away and never contact us again. Angel stood up shakily. And if we don't sign? Benjamin's smile was absolutely terrifying. Then we see how the justice system handles a con man who assaults children, a woman who aids and abets theft and domestic violence, and an old man who conspires to commit fraud. You can't prove any of that in court, Dick blustered. Benjamin gestured to the camera. I just did. The signing process took 2 hours. Angel's hands shook so badly he could barely hold the pen. Veronica cried through the entire process. Dick cursed steadily under his breath, but eventually signed everything. When it was over, Benjamin opened the warehouse doors and pointed toward the exit. You have 24 hours to leave Virginia, he said calmly. After that, the restraining orders take effect, and I start looking for you. As they reached the door, Angel turned back. This isn't over, Rhodes. You think you're some kind of tough guy, but Benjamin's movement was so fast that Angel didn't even see it coming. One moment he was talking, the next he was on the ground with Benjamin's knee on his chest and a combat knife pressed against his throat. Angel, Benjamin said conversationally, you assaulted my son. You stole from my family. You manipulated my wife into betraying everything that mattered. Do you really want to threaten me right now? Angel's eyes were wide with terror. No, man, I'm sorry. I didn't mean. Good. Benjamin stood up, returning the knife to its concealed sheath. Because if I ever see you again, if you ever contact my family again, if you even think about coming back to Virginia, I will finish what Rod started when he put you on the ground. Benjamin looked at Veronica one last time. You chose this. Remember that. As their car pulled away, Benjamin stood alone in the warehouse, feeling a weight he'd carried for months finally lift from his shoulders. His marriage was over, his trust had been shattered, and his son had learned ugly truths about human nature. But they were free, and Angel Gray, Veronica Rhodes, and Dick Finley were about to discover that freedom came with a price they'd never expected to pay. Chapter 6. The Hunt Begins. Benjamin returned home to find Rod waiting in the kitchen, his injuries healing, but his eyes carrying a wariness that broke his father's heart. At 16, Rod had been forced to confront the reality that the people who were supposed to protect him had been planning to abandon him. How did it go? Rod asked quietly. Benjamin sat across from his son at the kitchen table where they'd shared thousands of meals as a family. It's over. They're gone. All of them. All of them. Your mother signed divorce papers. Austin's real name is Angel Gray, and he's a professional con artist. Your grandfather helped plan the whole thing. Benjamin laid out the truth without sugarcoating it, treating Rod like the young man he was becoming rather than the child everyone else seemed to see. Rod absorbed this information with the stoicism he'd inherited from his father. What happens now? Now we move forward. You focus on school, wrestling, and getting into West Point. I focus on rebuilding what they tried to destroy. Do you think they'll really stay away? Benjamin's smile was predatory. They'll try to stay away. Whether they succeed depends on how smart they are. The answer to that question came sooner than expected. 3 days after the warehouse confrontation, Blake Cheney knocked on Benjamin's office door with an expression that promised bad news. They're not gone, Blake reported. Veronica's staying at a hotel downtown. Angel's holed up in a motel near the airport. And Dick's been making phone calls. Benjamin looked up from the military surplus catalog he'd been reviewing. What kind of phone calls? The kind where he's trying to find a lawyer who'll take the case on contingency. Apparently, he thinks you coerced them into signing those papers under duress. Were they under duress? Blake grinned. Technically, no. You never threatened violence, never held them against their will, never did anything that couldn't be explained as aggressive negotiation. But Dick's telling anyone who'll listen that you kidnapped them and forced them to sign at gunpoint. Benjamin closed the catalog and gave Blake his full attention. What else? Angel's been reaching out to his old contacts, trying to put together money for a comeback. He's telling people you ruined his life over a misunderstanding, that he and Veronica are the real victims here. And Veronica? She's been calling Rod's school, trying to set up meetings with counselors. claims she's concerned about his emotional state after witnessing domestic violence in the home. Benjamin felt the familiar cold settle in his chest. They weren't just refusing to leave. They were actively trying to undermine the new stability he'd built for Rod. "There's more," Blake continued. "Someone's been asking questions about your business, specifically about some of the more specialized services we provide for certain clients." Benjamin understood immediately. Some of his government contracts involved activities that couldn't withstand public scrutiny. If someone started digging into the right files, asking the right questions, it could destroy everything he'd built. "Who's asking?" "Private investigator named Mario Hewitt. Works for a law firm downtown. Same firm Dick's been trying to hire." Benjamin sat back in his chair, processing this escalation. They decided to declare war, using his son as a weapon and his livelihood as a target. The civilized solution he'd offered at the warehouse hadn't been enough for them. They wanted to fight. "Boss," Blake's voice carried a warning. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking they've made a serious mistake," Benjamin said quietly. "They had their chance to walk away. They chose to stay and fight instead. What do you want me to do?" Benjamin opened his desk drawer and pulled out a file he'd hoped never to use. It contained contingency plans for the kind of situations where legal remedies weren't sufficient, scenarios where enemies needed to be neutralized permanently. "I want you to activate Protocol 7. Blake's eyes widened. Protocol 7 was something they developed for clients who faced existential threats from enemies with resources and determination. It wasn't about legal justice or proportional response. It was about total elimination of the threat. All of them. All of them. Angel, Veronica, Dick, and anyone else who wants to make this a fight. "Boss, if we do this, there's no going back. These aren't foreign enemies or corporate spies. This is family." Benjamin looked at the photo on his desk. Rod, in his wrestling uniform, holding a trophy from state championships. His son's future hung in the balance, threatened by people who'd already proven they'd sacrifice a child's welfare for their own selfish goals. "Blake, the moment Angel punched my son, they stopped being family. The moment Veronica defended him for it, she stopped being my wife. The moment Dick decided to help them destroy Rod's life, he stopped being someone I had to protect. What about the legal consequences? If this goes wrong?" "It won't go wrong," Benjamin said with absolute certainty, "because we're not going to make the same mistake they did. We're not going to underestimate our opponents or assume they'll act rationally. We're going to end this threat completely." Blake nodded slowly. "What's the timeline? They want to play games with investigators and lawyers? Let them. While they're focused on gathering evidence for court cases that will never happen, we'll be solving the problem permanently." Benjamin stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Virginia hills where he'd planned to raise his son in peace and security. "Put together a team. I want complete surveillance on all 3 targets. I want to know everyone they talk to, everywhere they go, everything they plan." And then Benjamin turned back to Blake, his expression carrying the cold determination that had made him legendary in the military. "And then we're going to give them exactly what they've been asking for, a chance to be together forever. How long do they have?" Benjamin consulted his watch. "The investigator will need at least a week to put together anything useful. The lawyers will need 2 weeks to file motions. Veronica's meeting with the school counselor is scheduled for next Friday." He looked at Blake with the same expression he'd worn when planning raids in Afghanistan. "They have until next Friday to come to their senses and leave voluntarily. After that, the gloves come off. And if they do leave..." Benjamin's smile held no warmth whatsoever. "Blake, they've had 3 chances to walk away. Before the affair started, at the warehouse, and now. If they're still here Friday, it means they've chosen war over peace. Then we give them war." "We give them war," Benjamin confirmed. "But not the kind they're expecting. They think this is about money and custody and hurt feelings. They have no idea what they've actually started." As Blake left to begin preparations, Benjamin returned to his desk and opened a secure communication line he hadn't used since leaving the military. Some problems required resources that civilian law enforcement couldn't provide. Angel Gray, Veronica Rhodes, and Dick Finley were about to discover that Benjamin Rhodes hadn't just been a soldier. He'd been a very special kind of soldier, with very special kinds of friends. And those friends owed him favors. Chapter 7. The Network. The message came through encrypted channels that officially didn't exist, routed through servers that had no records, and carried by digital ghosts that left no footprints. Within 6 hours of Benjamin's call for assistance, 3 former operators materialized in Virginia like smoke taking human form. Wade McFarland arrived first, driving a nondescript sedan with plates that would trace back to a government motor pool that had been disbanded 5 years ago. Wade had been Benjamin's spotter in Afghanistan, a sniper whose patience was measured in days and whose accuracy was measured in dead enemies. Now he ran a consulting firm that specialized in corporate intelligence, though his clients included alphabet agencies that needed problems solved quietly. Leo Norton came next, flying in on a private jet registered to a shell company in Delaware. Leo had been the team's demolitions expert, a man who could make anything explode or, more importantly, make explosions look like accidents. His civilian cover was an insurance investigator who specialized in industrial accidents, which gave him both access and alibis for asking uncomfortable questions. Jeffrey Barnes drove down from D.C. in a truck loaded with surveillance equipment that would make the NSA jealous. Jeffrey had been their communications specialist, able to intercept, decode, and manipulate any electronic signal. His day job involved cybersecurity for a defense contractor, but his real expertise was in digital warfare. They met at Benjamin's warehouse after midnight, the same space where he'd extracted confessions from his targets. But now the warehouse was configured differently, tables covered with laptops, monitors displaying real-time surveillance feeds, and equipment that could track, monitor, or eliminate anyone within a 50-mile radius. "Talk to me," Wade said without preamble. He was a man who measured words like ammunition, never wasting either. Benjamin laid out the situation, the affair, the theft, the assault on Rod, and the ongoing attempts to destroy his family and business. He showed them the confessions, the financial records, and the evidence of continued harassment. 3 targets, Leo summarized. "Amateur hour. Don't underestimate them," Benjamin warned. "They're desperate, which makes them dangerous. And they've got nothing left to lose." Jeffrey looked up from his laptop. "They've got plenty to lose. Angel Gray has a sister in Phoenix who's been sending him money. Veronica's got a cousin in Miami who offered her a place to stay. Dick's got a pension and Social Security he can't afford to lose." "You've been busy," Blake observed. "I've been thorough," Jeffrey corrected. "These people aren't just isolated individuals. They're connected to a network of family and friends who could become problems if we're not careful." Wade studied the surveillance photos Blake had taken. "What's the objective? Neutralization, relocation, or elimination?" Benjamin considered the question carefully. In Afghanistan, the answer would have been simple: eliminate the threat and move on. But this was different. These were American civilians, and Rod would have to live with whatever Benjamin did for the rest of his life. Ideally, they disappear voluntarily and permanently. They realize they can't win and decide to start new lives somewhere far away. And if they don't realize that, then we help them realize it. Leo grinned. "I like helping people realize things." Jeffrey pulled up a new screen showing financial records. Angel's broke, but he's been trying to get loans using Veronica's name as collateral. Dick's been telling people he's got evidence of criminal activity that he can sell to the highest bidder. Veronica's been reaching out to divorce lawyers in 3 different states, shopping for someone who will promise her a bigger settlement. "They're not giving up," Wade observed. "They're escalating." Benjamin nodded. "Which means we escalate in return. But carefully. Rod's already been through enough trauma. Whatever we do, it can't splash back on him." "Understood," Leo said. Clean, quiet, and with plausible deniability. They worked through the night, developing what Jeffrey dubbed Operation Clean Slate, a multi-phase plan designed to eliminate the threat while providing Benjamin with unshakable alibis and Rod with complete protection. Phase 1 involved psychological pressure. Jeffrey would use his cybersecurity skills to make life increasingly difficult for all 3 targets. Credit reports that mysteriously developed errors, hotel reservations that vanished without explanation, phone numbers that stopped working at crucial moments. Nothing illegal, Nothing traceable, just a steady erosion of their ability to function normally. Phase 2 involves social pressure. Wade would leverage his network of contacts to ensure that no lawyer would take their case, no investigator would accept their money, and no authority figure would take their accusation seriously. Again, nothing provable, just a gradual realization that the system wasn't going to help them. Phase 3 was where things got serious. If the first two phases didn't convince them to leave voluntarily, Leo would begin creating accidents that would make staying in Virginia increasingly hazardous to their health. Car troubles, gas leaks, electrical problems, the kind of mishaps that happen to people who ignored clear warnings. And if none of that works? Blake asked. Benjamin's expression hardened. Then we moved to phase 4, which is whatever it takes to protect my son. The plan went into effect immediately. Jeffrey began his digital assault before dawn, targeting Angel first. By morning, Angel's credit cards were flagged for suspicious activity. His hotel reservation had been canceled due to a computer error, and his cell phone service had been temporarily suspended pending verification of account information. Angel spent the day in increasing frustration, trying to resolve problems that had no solution because they'd been created by someone who understood systems better than the people who built them. By evening, he was stranded at a different hotel, paying cash for a room that cost twice as much as his canceled reservation. Wade's part of the operation was more subtle but equally effective. The lawyer Dick had been trying to hire suddenly decided his firm was too busy to take new cases. The private investigator who'd been asking questions about Benjamin's business discovered that his license was under review for irregularities in previous cases. The school counselor Veronica had contacted was informed by her supervisor that meeting with non-custodial parents required additional authorization. By Friday afternoon, all three targets were experiencing the kind of systematic bad luck that paranoid people blamed on conspiracy and rational people attributed to coincidence. But Benjamin knew they weren't rational people. They were desperate people who'd already shown they'd blame others for problems they'd created themselves. The breaking point came Friday evening. Rod was at wrestling practice, safely surrounded by teammates and coaches who'd been quietly informed to watch for any unusual activity. Benjamin was in his office, monitoring surveillance feeds, when Blake burst through the door. "We've got a problem," Blake announced. Angel just showed up at the school. Benjamin's blood went cold. "Rod's at practice." "I know, but Angel doesn't. He's in the parking lot, waiting for dismissal time. He's got something in his hand." Benjamin was already reaching for his keys. "What kind of something?" "Can't tell from the camera angle. Could be a phone, could be a weapon." Benjamin's training kicked in, overlaying calm calculation over murderous rage. "Alert Wade and Leo. Have them converge on the school. Jeffrey, I want every electronic device within a mile of that parking lot monitored." "What about the police?" "No police. Angel hasn't actually done anything yet. And if we involve law enforcement, it becomes a public incident. Rod doesn't need that kind of attention." Benjamin drove toward the school with controlled urgency, his mind cycling through possibilities and responses. Angel was either there to confront Rod directly, to gather intelligence for some larger plan, or to create a scene that would support Veronica's claims about Benjamin's domestic violence. None of those options were acceptable. His phone buzzed with an update from Wade. "Target is on foot, moving toward the gym entrance. Still carrying unknown object." Benjamin's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Angel Gray had just crossed the line from nuisance to active threat, and Benjamin Rhodes had spent 15 years learning how to neutralize active threats. Phase 4 was about to begin. Chapter 8, The Predator. Benjamin arrived at the school to find Angel standing near the gymnasium entrance, his posture tense and agitated. From a distance, he looked like any other parent waiting for pickup, but Benjamin's trained eye caught the subtle signs. The way Angel kept checking his phone, the nervous energy in his movements, and most importantly, the fact that he was positioning himself to intercept students as they left practice. Wade's voice crackled through Benjamin's earpiece. "Target has been here for 20 minutes. He's been asking other parents about Rod's schedule. Where are you positioned?" "Northwest corner of the parking lot. Leo's at the south entrance. Jeffrey's in the van monitoring all communications in the area." Benjamin parked and activated his own comms unit. Jeffrey, what's Angel been doing on his phone? Multiple calls to Veronica and Dick. Last conversation was heated. For what I could intercept, they're pressuring him to get something concrete on you and Rod. Something they can use in court. Benjamin understood immediately. Angel was here to provoke an incident, to get Rod angry enough to do something that could be filmed and used as evidence of the violent household Veronica was claiming existed. It was a desperate plan, but desperate people made dangerous enemies. Wade, can you get a clear shot if needed? Affirmative, but there are too many civilians around for anything dramatic. Benjamin checked his watch. Practice would end in 10 minutes, and Rod would emerge from the gym with his teammates. If Angel was planning to confront him, it would happen then, probably in front of witnesses who could testify about whatever incident Angel was trying to create. New plan, Benjamin said into his comm. Leo, I need you to create a distraction. Something that draws attention away from the gym entrance. What kind of distraction? Use your imagination. Just make sure it's not permanent. Benjamin got out of his car and began walking toward the school, taking a route that would bring him to Angel's position from behind. He moved with the patient stalking pace he'd perfected in Afghanistan, using parked cars and landscaping to mask his approach. Angel was too focused on the gym entrance to notice the predator closing in behind him. 2 minutes before practice was scheduled to end, Leo's distraction materialized in the form of a small electrical fire in the school's main parking lot. Sparks began shooting from transformer box, and the sharp smell of burning electronics filled the air. Parents began gathering around the spectacle, cell phones appearing to record the minor emergency. Angel turned toward the commotion, momentarily distracted, and Benjamin used that moment to close the final distance between them. Hello, Angel. Angel spun around, his face going white when he saw Benjamin standing less than 3 feet away. Jesus, you scared me. What are you doing here? I'm picking up my son. The question is, what are you doing here? Angel's eyes darted toward the gym entrance, where the first students were beginning to emerge. I want to talk to Rod. To apologize for what happened. Apologize. Benjamin's voice carried no emotion whatsoever. You mean apologize for assaulting him in his own home? It was an accident, man. I never meant to hurt him. Benjamin studied Angel's face, noting the micro-expressions that revealed the lie. In interrogation training, he'd learned to read the subtle signs that separated truth from deception, and Angel Gray was broadcasting dishonesty like a neon sign. Show me your hands, Benjamin said quietly. What? Your hands? Show them to me. Angel hesitated, then slowly revealed his right hand, which had been concealed in his jacket pocket. He was holding a cell phone with the camera app open, positioned to record whatever confrontation he'd been planning to provoke with Rod. Planning to make a movie? Benjamin asked. I don't know what you mean. Benjamin reached out and gently took the phone from Angel's unresisting grip. With practiced efficiency, he deleted the camera app and handed the device back. You have 10 seconds to get in your car and leave, Benjamin said conversationally. After that, I'm going to assume you're here to threaten my son, and I'm going to respond accordingly. Angel's voice cracked. You can't threaten me. There are witnesses everywhere. Benjamin smiled. Angel, I haven't threatened you. I've stated a fact. In 8 seconds, if you're still standing here, I'm going to conclude that you represent an active threat to a minor child, and I'm going to neutralize that threat. You're crazy. 5 seconds. Angel looked around desperately, realizing that the other parents were still distracted by Leo's electrical fire and wouldn't notice anything that happened near the gym. Benjamin had positioned himself so that Angel's back was to the building, making it impossible for anyone to see his face or read his lips. 3 seconds. Angel broke. Okay, I'm leaving. But this isn't over, Rhodes. Veronica is going to get her son back, and you're going to... Benjamin's movement was so fast that Angel never saw it coming. One moment he was talking, the next he was pressed against the gymnasium wall with Benjamin's forearm across his throat and a combat knife positioned just below his left ear. Angel, Benjamin whispered, let me explain something very clearly. My son is not Veronica's to get back. He's mine to protect. And if you ever come near him again, if you ever threaten him again, If you even think about him again, I will hunt you down and kill you slowly. The blade pressed just hard enough to draw a thin line of blood. Do you understand me? Angel's voice was barely a whisper. Yes. Good. Benjamin stepped back, allowing Angel to slump against the wall. Now run. Angel didn't need to be told twice. He stumbled toward the parking lot, his legs unsteady and his breath coming in ragged gasps. Benjamin watched him go, noting how he kept looking over his shoulder as if expecting pursuit. Boss, Wade's voice crackled through the earpiece. Target is mobile, heading for the main road. Wanted to follow. Negative. Let him go. But mark his direction. Rod emerged from the gym a few minutes later, his wrestling bag slung over his shoulder and his face still flushed from practice. He spotted his father immediately and jogged over. Hey, Dad, what are you doing here? I thought I was getting a ride with Tommy. Change of plans, Benjamin said, putting his arm around his son's shoulders. How was practice? Good. Coach says I'm ready for the tournament next week. Rod paused, studying his father's face. Is everything okay? You look intense. Benjamin guided Rod toward the car, scanning the parking lot for any sign of remaining threats. Everything's fine. Just wanted to make sure you got home safely. As they drove away from the school, Benjamin's phone buzzed with updates from his team. Angel had driven straight to Veronica's hotel, where he'd spent 20 minutes in her room before storming out and driving to Dick's apartment. Surveillance indicated heated arguments at both locations, with gestures suggesting blame and recrimination. They're falling apart, Jeffrey reported. Angel's telling them the plan failed. Veronica's blaming him for being careless, and Dick's threatening to go to the police with what he knows about your business. Benjamin considered this development as he pulled into his driveway. The psychological pressure was working. They were turning on each other, making mistakes, and becoming increasingly desperate. But desperation made them more dangerous, not less. Dad, Rod's voice cut through his thoughts. Can I ask you something? Always. Are we safe? I mean, is this really over, or are they going to keep coming after us? Benjamin looked at his son, 16 years old, athletic and intelligent, but still young enough to need protection from the worst aspects of human nature. Rod deserved a father who would shield him from these realities, not drag him deeper into them. It's going to be over soon, Benjamin promised. Very soon. That night, after Rod had gone to bed, Benjamin sat in his study reviewing surveillance reports and planning the final phase of Operation Clean Slate. Angel's appearance at the school had been the last provocation he was willing to tolerate. Phase 4 would begin at dawn, and by sunset, Angel Gray, Veronica Rhodes, and Dick Finley would discover what happened to people who threatened Benjamin Rhodes' family. Chapter 9, Final Judgment. The end began at 3:17 a.m. with a phone call that would change everything. Benjamin's secure phone buzzed with Jeffrey's voice, tight with urgency. Boss, we've got a major escalation. They're not just talking about going to the police, they're planning to take Rod. Benjamin was instantly awake, his mind snapping to full alertness. Explain. I've been monitoring their communications all night. They're planning a snatch-and-grab operation for tomorrow morning. Angel's convinced Veronica that you're going to disappear them if they don't act first. Dick's been in contact with someone he claims has special skills for this kind of work. Benjamin felt ice form in his veins. What kind of special skills? The kind that comes with military experience and flexible morals. Guy named Raymond Rollins, dishonorably discharged from the Army 3 years ago for assault. He's been doing freelance work for people who need problems solved outside the law. The situation had just transformed from a family dispute into active warfare. They weren't just trying to hurt Benjamin anymore. They were planning to kidnap his son. Where's Rod now? Safe in his room. I've got passive surveillance on the house perimeter, and Wade's positioned in the woods with Overwatch. No movement detected. Benjamin was already dressing, his movements economical and purposeful. Time frame. They're planning to hit the house at 0800 when Rod leaves for his morning run. Rollins has been casing the neighborhood for 2 days, learning the routine. Then we end this. Tonight. All of it. Benjamin activated emergency protocols he'd hoped never to use. Within 20 minutes, Wade, Leo, and Jeffrey had converged on the warehouse that would serve as their operations center for the final time. Blake arrived with equipment that wasn't found in any civilian catalog. Military-grade weapons, surveillance gear, and tools designed for neutralizing threats permanently. Objective? Wade asked, checking the action on a rifle that officially didn't exist. Complete elimination of the threat, Benjamin replied. Angel, Veronica, Dick, and this new player Rollins. All of them, tonight, before they can move against Rod. Rules of engagement. Benjamin looked at each of his team members. Men who'd followed him through hell in Afghanistan and would follow him into hell again if necessary. No witnesses, no survivors, no evidence. Clean sweep. Leo smiled grimly. About time. The operation began with Rollins, the most dangerous member of their group. Jeffrey's electronic surveillance had located him in a motel room 6 miles from Benjamin's house, studying floor plans and timing charts with military precision. Unlike Angel, Veronica, and Dick, Rollins was a genuine threat, someone with training, equipment, and the willingness to use violence against children. Wade took point, approaching the motel with the patience of a professional hunter. Rollins had positioned himself in a corner room with clear sight lines and multiple escape routes. Smart tactics that would have worked against civilian opposition, but were merely interesting challenges for someone of Wade's caliber. The elimination was swift and silent. Wade's sniper training had taught him to kill with single shots that left no evidence of struggle, and Rollins died without ever knowing he was being hunted. Jeffrey immediately began scrubbing electronic records, erasing any trace that Raymond Rollins had ever been in Virginia. Phase 1 complete, Wade reported. Target neutralized. Dick was next. Benjamin found Veronica's father in his apartment, drinking bourbon and reviewing legal documents that outlined their planned strategy for destroying Benjamin's life and business. Dick's military service had ended 30 years ago, and he'd grown soft and careless in civilian life. Benjamin entered through the balcony door that Leo had quietly disabled, moving through the apartment like a ghost until he was standing directly behind Dick's chair. "Hello, Dick." Dick spun around, bourbon splashing across the legal papers. "Benjamin? What are you doing here?" "I'm here to discuss Rod's future," Benjamin said quietly. "Specifically, your plan to kidnap him tomorrow morning." Dick's face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." Benjamin gestured to the documents scattered across the table. "These papers suggest otherwise. Financial arrangements for Rollins, custody transfer documents, escape routes through Mexico. Very thorough planning. You can't prove any of this." "I don't need to prove it," Benjamin replied. "I just need to stop it." Dick tried to stand, reaching for a hunting rifle mounted on the wall, but Benjamin's combat reflexes were faster than an old man's desperation. The confrontation lasted less than 30 seconds, ending with Dick slumped in his chair, eyes staring at nothing. Benjamin spent 10 minutes staging the scene to look like a heart attack brought on by alcohol and stress. By the time he left, Dick Finley had become another sad statistic, an elderly man who died alone, overwhelmed by personal problems he couldn't solve. Phase 2 complete, Benjamin reported. Proceeding to final targets. Angel and Veronica were together in her hotel room, planning the details of Rod's kidnapping with the desperate energy of people who knew they were running out of options. They'd chosen a downtown hotel specifically because they thought the public location would provide security, never realizing that Benjamin had stopped playing by civilian rules. Leo had prepared for this eventuality with characteristic thoroughness. The hotel's electrical system experienced a catastrophic failure at exactly 2 a.m., plunging the building into darkness and triggering fire alarms that sent guests streaming into the parking lot. In the chaos of evacuation, no one noticed the maintenance worker who entered through a service entrance and made his way to the 8th floor. Benjamin found them huddled in their room, arguing about whether to proceed with the kidnapping plan now that Rollins wasn't answering his phone. Angel was pacing frantically, while Veronica sat on the bed with her head in her hands. "Having second thoughts?" Benjamin asked, stepping into the room. They both spun toward his voice, their faces showing the terror of prey animals who'd suddenly realized they were being hunted. "Benjamin," Veronica whispered, "how did you? We're in a public hotel. There are people everywhere." The people are evacuating because of a fire alarm, Benjamin explained patiently. And the security cameras are offline because of an electrical problem. We're quite alone. Angel backed toward the window. Look, man, we can work this out. We were just talking, making plans for the future. You were planning to kidnap my son. That's not. We wouldn't. Benjamin's expression stopped Angel's denials cold. Angel, I've heard your phone conversations. I've read your documents. I know about Rollins, about the custody papers, about every detail of your plan. The only question now is how this ends. Veronica found her voice. You can't just murder us. People will ask questions. There will be investigations. What people? Benjamin asked reasonably. Dick's dead. Rollins is dead. You've alienated everyone who might have cared about you. Who exactly is going to ask questions? The truth of it hit them like a physical blow. In their desperation to destroy Benjamin's life, they'd systematically cut themselves off from everyone who might have protected them. Please, Veronica whispered. I'm still Rod's mother. No, Benjamin corrected gently. You stopped being Rod's mother when you watched Angel assault him and decided he deserved it. You became something else then, a threat to my son's safety and happiness. He'll never forgive you for this, Angel said desperately. When Rod finds out what you did. Rod will never know what I did, Benjamin replied. Because there won't be anything to know. You're going to disappear, just like you planned to make him disappear. The difference is that my disappearance will be permanent. The final confrontation was swift and efficient. Angel tried to fight, drawing on his physical training, but he was a fitness instructor facing a combat veteran. Veronica tried to run, but the door was locked and Benjamin controlled the only key. When it was over, Benjamin staged the scene with meticulous care. A murder-suicide, triggered by desperation and guilt over their failed schemes. Angel's prints on the weapon, Veronica's prints on a suicide note confessing to adultery, theft, and child endangerment. Evidence of drug use that would explain their paranoid behavior. Financial records showing mounting debts and legal problems that provided clear motivation. By dawn, all 4 threats had been neutralized. Raymond Rollins was a heart attack victim in a motel. Dick Finley had suffered fatal cardiac arrest in his apartment. Angel Gray and Veronica Rhodes were tragic lovers who destroyed themselves rather than face the consequences of their actions. Benjamin returned home as the sun was rising, entering through the back door as quietly as he'd left. Rod was still asleep, safe in his room, protected from truths he never needed to know. 3 days later, Benjamin sat in his study reviewing the final reports. The investigations had been perfunctory. Police found exactly what Benjamin had intended them to find, and nobody questioned the convenient deaths of people who'd been exhibiting increasingly erratic behavior. Rod had grieved appropriately for his mother and grandfather, but Benjamin noticed that the grief was mixed with relief. The constant tension in the house was gone, replaced by the calm security of a family that could finally move forward. Dad, Rod knocked on the study door. Can we talk? Always. Rod entered and sat in the chair across from Benjamin's desk. I know you didn't have anything to do with what happened to Mom and the others. Benjamin studied his son's face, noting the intelligence and awareness that made Rod so much like himself. Why would you think I had anything to do with it? Because they were threatening us, and now they're gone, and you're the kind of man who protects his family no matter what it costs. Benjamin felt a surge of pride mixed with concern. Rod was perceptive enough to see the truth, but loyal enough not to speak it aloud. What matters, Benjamin said carefully, is that you're safe, that you can focus on school and wrestling and building the future you want without worrying about people who might hurt you. That's all that matters to you? That's everything that matters to me. Rod nodded slowly. Good, because I never want to see people like that again. People who would hurt family for money or revenge, or just because they can. You won't, Benjamin promised. I'll make sure of it. 6 months later, Rod won the state wrestling championship and received a full appointment to West Point. Benjamin watched from the stands, seeing the young man his son was becoming, strong, honorable, and absolutely loyal to the people who earned his trust. That night, as they celebrated Rod's victories, Benjamin allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He'd faced the greatest threat his family had ever encountered and eliminated it completely. His son was safe, his future was secure, and no one would ever again be allowed to threaten what Benjamin Rhodes had built. In the end, that was all that mattered. Family, loyalty, and the absolute certainty that some lines could never be crossed without paying the ultimate price. Angel Gray, Veronica Rhodes, and Dick Finley had learned that lesson too late. Rod Rhodes would never need to learn it all.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.